In the world of Naruto, there are many shinobi who have achieved Herculean tasks, from taking on thousands of ninjas single-handedly to defeating tailed beasts. Yet, even among these shinobi, Minato and Kushina stand out as two of the strongest fighters of all time. After all, Minato and Kushina were the only people in their generation powerful enough to take on the full 9 tails, and they did it not once, but twice. Considering the only other ninja in history who managed to suppress Kurama without the use of genjutsu is Hashirama, the god of shinobi himself, it should be self-evident how crazy this feat is. But, despite all of this, Minato and Kushina are almost never talked about as a team, so in this video, I'm going to change that by pitting them against the most infamous villain group in all of Naruto, the Akatsuki. Essentially, I'll discuss how well Minato and Kushina perform in a gauntlet against each Akatsuki duo, with the difficulty increasing each round. Before we begin, as always, if you enjoy Naruto content, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to support the channel and watch more videos just like this one. Starting off, the first round of this gauntlet is against Hidan and Kakuzu. I don't think anyone is going to disagree with me here when I say that the immortal duo is going to have a very tough time against Minato and Kushina. As most of you have probably heard multiple times at this point, Hidan is self-admittedly the slowest Akatsuki member, which is a very bad thing when you're fighting Minato, someone who managed to outspeed all the other Hokage to the battlefield and is consistently compared to the fastest characters in the verse. And, even though Kushina isn't known for her speed, she is still quick in her own right, since she has shown the ability to react to Kurama on multiple occasions, who War Arc Sage Mode Naruto considers to be fast. So, Hidan has no chance of getting a drop of blood from either of them to activate his ritual, and even though his immortality is very broken, it's a lot less useful in this situation because both Minato and Kushina are accomplished healers who can just suppress Hidan's chakra to take him out of the battle. To be honest, I think Hidan's basically irrelevant in this fight and would end up getting bound and suppressed by Kushina's chains before he'd even be able to react. This leaves Kakuzu as the main threat to Minato and Kushina, but considering Kakuzu's performance against Team 10 and Kakashi, he doesn't have any chance of winning. Don't be mistaken, Kakuzu definitely had the upper hand when fighting Kakashi and constantly pressured him throughout their battle, but it's undeniable that Kakashi was still capable of somewhat keeping up with Kakuzu. In the beginning of the fight, Kakashi was able to directly tank an attack from Kakuzu's Wind Heart despite already being preoccupied with Hidan, and right after this, Kakashi successfully outspeeds and intercepts Kakuzu's False Darkness with his Lightning Blade. So, even though Kakuzu was stronger than Kakashi, they were both still pretty relative. And keep in mind, Kakashi only ever used his base Sharingan in this fight, meaning once he activates the MS, Kakashi is likely more powerful than Kakuzu, which is actually confirmed by Kakashi later on implying that he would have beaten Kakuzu with the Mangekyo had he been forced to use it. Considering this fact, Minato and Kushina should definitely be significantly stronger and faster than Kakuzu, which I know may be a hot take regarding Kushina specifically, since she isn't really hyped up in the series the same way Minato is, but the statements about her actually back this up. Kushina was acknowledged by Kurama alongside Minato as a legitimate goal for Naruto to surpass, and we actually see that Naruto himself thinks the same thing. After Kushina helps Naruto tame the Nine Tails, Naruto says that his dream is to become a cooler guy than Minato and an even more powerful shinobi than Kushina. This blatantly implies that Kushina is more powerful than Naruto, which is very impressive as Naruto had already mastered Sage Mode and unlocked QB Chakra Mode at this point in the series. Now to be fair, Naruto hadn't done his chakra control training with B yet when this statement was made, so saying that Kushina is stronger than full power KCM Naruto would be disingenuous, but even scaling to an untrained KCM still puts Kushina far beyond anything Kakuzu could handle. Honestly, the only real trouble Minato and Kushina might have in this fight is dealing damage to Kakuzu because his durability is pretty insane. Kakuzu was able to tank a Paw Strike from the fully transformed Two Tails in his base form, which is super impressive, especially when considering that Kakuzu has access to the Diamond Morph, an Earth-style jutsu that even further amplifies his durability. Some people may bring up the fact that Kakuzu was pierced by Kakashi's Lightning Blade, but this isn't really an anti-feat, because Earth style is weak to lightning style, and Kakashi even says that Kakuzu just had bad luck due to the elemental matchup, implying that the lightning blade wouldn't have been able to pierce Kakuzu's diamond morph had it not been at an advantage. This raises serious doubts about Minato and Kushina's ability to harm Kakuzu through diamond morph, but I do still think they could do it. The major weakness of diamond morph is that Kakuzu is essentially a sitting duck when he uses it to protect his entire body, as the flesh he hardens with the jutsu isn't capable of moving. So, even if Kakuzu uses diamond morph to prevent Minato from immediately blitzing and one-tapping him with a flying Raijin level 2 Rasengan, I do think that Minato and Kushina could pull off a combo attack like they did against the Nine Tails in the recent one-shot manga, where Kushina would use her chains to suppress Kakuzu's chakra and weaken his diamond morph before Minato finishes him off with the Rasengan. With all of this in mind, I do think that Minato and Kushina should be able to handle the immortal duo relatively easily, as they are way too fast to be tagged by Hidan or Kakuzu, and have solid win conditions to take both of them down. Next up, the team Minato and Kushina have to take down is Sasori and Deidara. Right off the bat, this duo will pose a significantly bigger threat than Hidan and Kakuzu, because both Minato and Kushina have never shown the ability to resist poison, meaning they'll be down for the count if Sasori manages to even land a single hit with his poison-coated weapons, or makes them breathe in his poison gas. Additionally, Minato in particular has never had great durability showings, so Deidara's play bomb should definitely be able to harm him, since they were strong enough to take out the Three Tails. That being said, even though Sasori and Deidara both have win conditions, they are still going to struggle a lot in this fight because of how much faster Minato is. We know that in character, Minato will throw out dozens of pre-marked kunai at the beginning of the fight, which would let him teleport all across the battlefield. And what's more is that Minato already has an FTG mark on Kushina, so if it ever seems like she's going to get hit, he can teleport to her and then bring her back to one of his numerous kunai. I think this is largely how the beginning of the fight will play out, until Minato and Kushina eventually familiarize themselves with the jutsu arsenals of Sasori and Deidara, at which point they would be able to counter the artist duo's abilities pretty well. Specifically, I think Deidara and Sasori wouldn't be strong enough to break through Kushina's ceiling chain barrier, as even a younger Hiruzen who was capable of pushing Kurama out of the Leaf Village couldn't get through a barrier that was created by Kushina while she was literally dying from having the Nine Tails extracted. So, even though Deidara's bombs are Biju level, I doubt they will be able to burst through Kushina's barrier, and the same goes for all the attacks of Sasori's Hiruko puppet. However, unlike Sasori and Deidara, Minato will be easily able to enter and exit the barrier with FTG, which gives him a massive advantage, as it essentially allows Minato to be as aggressive as he wants, because if he's ever in danger of getting hit, he can just teleport back inside the barrier, where it's completely safe. In this case scenario, Minato will be able to put a lot of pressure on Deidara and Sasori with his superior speed, and even though the artist duo may be able to defend themselves for a bit, they'll be very overwhelmed, and in my opinion, this would lead to Deidara being the first to go down. This might seem strange to some of you, since Deidara is capable of flying in the sky, which typically makes him very hard to hit, but there is genuinely nothing stopping Minato from using a frog summon to gain altitude, then throwing a kunai at Deidara to teleport to him and land a Rasengan. Deidara in particular would be vulnerable to this because he admitted that base Sasuke was already too fast for him, so Minato's flying Raijin is way beyond his ability to react, especially since Sasuke outright admitted that healthy Orochimaru was stronger than him, and Orochimaru is way slower than Minato. The only way Deidara could win here is either through the C4 micro bombs or by self-destructing with C0 to take Minato and Kushina out with him, but the problem is that both these abilities require a few seconds worth of charge up time, which Minato would be able to take advantage of to kill Deidara before he can activate them. This leaves Sasori as the only remaining threat, and if he hadn't revealed his true form up to this point, he definitely will now. Sasori's two main attacks in this form consist of the 100 puppets and the third Kazekage puppet. Starting with the 100 puppets, this might be a hot take, but I don't think they'll be much of a threat here. Of course, there is a statement Sasori made about the puppets destroying an entire nation, but this is never shown in the manga, so there's no real way to tell how strong they would be because of it. Besides, we've already seen statements about the Sanid alone being able to destroy small nations as well, so it's not like this nation-destroying tier of power is far beyond Minato or Kushina. And, considering that a heavily fatigued Sakura was capable of easily one-tapping the puppets, Kushina's chains would unironically be able to tear through them en masse, or alternatively, Minato could just summon Gamabuta to crush them all at once. Even though the 100 puppets won't be much of a threat in this fight, something Sasori has that absolutely will be is the third Kazekage puppet. The third Kazekage is hailed as the strongest Kazekage of all time, with his iron sand being stated to be the most powerful weapon the sand possesses. This makes the third Kazekage even stronger than Rasa, which is very impressive since Rasa was relative to an early War Arc Gaara. Even in the early part of the War Arc, Gaara's sand was strong enough to consistently block attacks from the top tiers of the verse, so the third Kazekage's iron sand being even tougher than this may make it a hassle for Minato and Kushina to deal with. But Sasori's Kazekage puppet actually has one major weakness that Sakura actually points out in their fight. The puppet can only attack when Sasori moves his fingers, and you can predict how the puppet will move by looking at the gestures Sasori makes. By exploiting this weakness, Sakura was able to react to and dodge Sasori's Kazekage puppet, and Chiyo even notes that Sakura didn't need her help to take on Sasori anymore. Since Minato is both faster and smarter than this 15-year-old Sakura, there is no reason why he wouldn't also be able to anticipate the movements of Sasori's Kazekage puppet as well, at which point it's pretty much over, as Minato can just teleport to where he knows the puppet will appear and destroy it with the Rasengan. After Minato destroys the third Kazekage puppet, Sasori will be in a very tough position as his only puppet left is his own body. Without any of his puppets, Sasori will quickly be overwhelmed by Minato and Kushina, but they may still have trouble actually putting him down. You see, Sasori's puppet body has the ability to completely separate all of its parts, which disperses all the force from attacks that hit it. This ability would likely allow Sasori to take a Rasengan from Minato, and even avoid getting his chakra suppressed by Kushina's chains, as if she tries to wrap them around him, Sasori can just separate his body parts to escape. This leaves destroying Sasori's core as the only way for Minato and Kushina to win, and luckily for them, I think Minato will realize he needs to destroy the core to kill Sasori pretty quickly. We know from the Third Great Ninja War that Minato is a great sensory shinobi. Not only can he sense the number of combatants in any given area, he can also distinguish between shadow clones and real people. Because of this, when Minato realizes that Sasori can't be defeated like a normal human, it would make perfect sense for him to try to sense Sasori's chakra, at which point he would realize that all of Sasori's chakra is gathered in his core. From here, Minato would know that destroying Sasori's core is the key to killing him, and once Minato relays this information to Kushina, it's pretty much a wrap, as they're both easily strong enough to rip Sasori's core right out of his body and destroy it. So, even though there was a lot Minato and Kushina would have to deal with when fighting against Deidara and Sasori, I do think that they'd be able to pull it off, despite the artist duo putting up a pretty good fight. The next duo Minato and Kushina are squaring off against is Pain and Konan. If I'm being honest here, this fight is practically a 2v1 against Pain, because Konan is going to get completely obliterated right off the bat, due to her getting stomped by base Jiraiya. Some people may bring up the fact that Jiraiya only beat Konan that badly because his toad oil countered her paper jutsu, but this completely ignores that all of Minato's toad summons have the exact same oil at their disposal. So, Minato could use the toad oil to negate Konan's paper jutsu, just like Jiraiya did, and then Kushina would be able to use her chains to bind Konan and take her out of the fight. Don't get me wrong, Konan's a very strong shinobi, but unfortunately for her, Minato's toad oil renders her entire paper arsenal useless, and it's not like she can pull out the 600 billion paper bobs that she almost killed Obito with unless she has prep time. This means that the only real threat here is Pain himself, and even though he's an absolute monster, fighting against both Minato and Kushina at once is going to be very tough for him to do. While Pain has very good showings against Jiraiya and the Leaf, his best performance by far is against Sage Mode Naruto. To give Naruto credit where it's due, he could react to and destroy the paths, and Pain also admits that his fight with Naruto was the farthest he had ever been pushed, but it's important to consider that Nagato had just spent a lot of chakra taking on the entire Leaf Village prior to fighting Naruto, and it stated that he was explicitly avoiding Naruto's vital points because he needed to kidnap Naruto alive, which just goes to show that the version of Pain Naruto fought against wasn't at full power. Additionally, it is just stated that Pain's powers surpass Sage Mode Naruto's in Shonen Jump, so Pain is clearly the stronger of the two, but in my opinion, it's still fair to say that they are at least somewhat relative, with Pain just being higher on the totem pole. This is pretty important to consider when scaling Pain, because as I said earlier, Naruto stated that he's weaker than Kushina in the war arc, and Naruto isn't even comparable to Minato until he masters KCM, since Minato told Naruto that Obito, someone Minato already beat, was a greater threat than Pain, and required mastering the chakra of the Nine Tails to take on. This narrative paints a pretty decent picture for Minato and Kushina, because it does show that they have similar scaling to Pain due to both of them being stronger than Sage Mode Naruto as well. And even though Pain's abilities will be tricky for Minato and Kushina to deal with since they never faced off against a Rinnegan user before, I do think that they can counter most of his jutsu. Under normal circumstances, Pain's major advantage is his ability to overwhelm his opponents with his vast arsenal, but this strategy won't work well in this situation because apart from Tendo, all the other paths of Pain don't really have a way to take Minato or Kushina down. From the beginning of the fight, the animal path will be rendered completely useless because Kushina's adamantine sealing chains would be able to easily overpower any creature it summons. I mean, even the Nine Tails struggled significantly to break her chains, and I don't think I need to explain why the animal path summons that were getting ripped apart by Jiraiya's hair aren't close to this level. In fact, Kushina's adamantine chains will even be a massive threat to the paths themselves, because if anything, Pain is more of a rival to Six Tails Naruto, rather than the full Nine Tails that the chains scale to. And Minato may even be a bigger problem than Kushina in this fight, because he's easily fast enough to blitz the paths, and a simple Rasengan would be more than enough to take most of them down. Sure, the Parade Path can absorb ninjutsu, but Minato's basic kunai strikes were capable of cutting through the Eight Tails partial transformation tentacles, so after he realizes that the Parade Path can absorb his Rasengan, Minato could pretty easily slice it in half with a kunai. As for the human path, the only way it could be a threat to Minato and Kushina is by trying to rip their souls out, and we already saw that they were able to win a soul tug-of-war against the full Nine Tails when Minato used the Reaper Death Seal against it, so they sure as hell aren't going to lose one to Pain. Of all the non-combat paths, the Naraka path is probably going to be the most useful in this fight, because it will probably be able to revive a couple paths using the King of Hell before Minato and Kushina catch on to what it's doing, but when they realize what's going on, they'll know to target Naraka, and it won't last much longer after that. Even the Ashura path, which is physically stronger than the others, won't be much of a threat here because it was one-shot by Naruto's Rasengan, so Minato and Kushina should be able to destroy it as well without much trouble. The only path of Pain that would realistically be able to defend against Minato and Kushina for an extended period of time is Tendo, as it can use Almighty Push to blow Minato's kunai away and prevent the possibility of getting blitzed by teleportation. That being said, Minato and Kushina would still be able to pick off the other paths one by one while Nagato is too busy trying to defend the Diva path, and eventually, this would leave Tendo as the only path left standing. At this point, Nagato will probably resort to using the Chibaku Tensei, but the problem is that Minato could just use Flying Thunder God to teleport both himself and Kushina outside of it, which takes Pain's ultimate trump card off the table. Even though the Diva path may be able to stall by blowing away Minato's kunai and Kushina's chains with Almighty Push, he can only use it once every 5 seconds, and Minato is definitely fast enough to take advantage of that time interval and hit him with a Rasengan just like Naruto did to win the fight. So, even though Pain is extremely powerful, Konan being hard countered by the Toad Oil takes her out of the equation immediately, and the idea of Pain being able to beat both Minato and Kushina while fighting alone isn't something I could see happening. Last but not least, the final duo Minato and Kushina are taking on is Itachi and Kisame. Now I will say that this matchup is easily the most interesting to talk about because Itachi and Kisame are both very powerful shinobi that can compete with War Arc tier characters, which means neither of them are getting low diff tier. Plus, we know that Itachi and Kisame actually get along, so chances are they will have pretty good teamwork, unlike Hidan and Kakuzu, or Sasori and Deidara, who are more likely to butt heads and get in each other's way. First, I do want to go over how strong Kisame is, because scaling him based on his fights with B and Guy is very complicated and can lead to some wild interpretations of his power. Starting with the B fight, at first glance it may seem like Kisame was equal to Killer B in the version 2 cloak, but upon closer inspection, this is blatantly false. Kisame was constantly absorbing B's chakra throughout the fight, and he's only ever able to react to V2B after absorbing his Biju cloak 3 times. And we see that before Kisame absorbed the version 2 cloak, V2B was able to blitz him very badly, and even ripped out his ribcage, which Kisame only ever recovered from because he had absorbed B's chakra in the first place. Due to this, it makes much more sense to use the Guy fight to scale Kisame, because it's not like Kisame was absorbing any chakra from Guy's taijutsu. Despite Kisame doing pretty well in this fight, there are still a lot of misconceptions about it, because people tried to claim that Kisame was on par with 7th Gate Guy, when that clearly wasn't the case. It is true that Kisame's Water Shark Bomb was able to move at the same speed as Hirodora, which is pretty impressive, but the fact is that Kisame was banking on his Water Shark Bomb being able to absorb Guy's chakra, and when it failed to do that because Hirodora is purely taijutsu, Kisame literally got one shot. Because of this, it's much more consistent for Kisame to be equal to 6th Gate Guy, which is still great, especially when considering the fact that Kisame was fatigued and didn't even have Samehada during their fight. However, I do think that Minato and Kushina are still marginally stronger than Kisame at the very least, because an untrained KCM Naruto was able to completely demolish him the first time they met. Now, I know Kisame was heavily fatigued during this encounter, so it would be very disingenuous to say that Naruto is stronger than him based on this feat alone, but what's more important than the feat itself is Kisame's statement right after it happened, where he admits that Naruto's unbelievably fast. This means that Naruto is at worst comparable to Kisame, which is important because, as I said earlier, Naruto is stated to be less skilled than Minato and weaker than Kushina at this point in the series. Even though Kisame is somewhat weaker than Minato and Kushina, he will still be able to put up a very good fight, especially with Itachi there to back him up. In the war arc, Itachi is shown being able to keep up with KCM Naruto after he had completed his chakra control training with B. To be fair, Naruto had just finished making the Shadow Clones to help the Alliance, which is a big deal because these Shadow Clones had enough chakra to compete with Kage on their own, meaning Naruto had to be pretty fatigued from creating them. But another important factor to consider here is that Itachi only had his 3 Tomo Sharingan activated while he was keeping up with Naruto. The Mangekyo Sharingan is obviously significantly more powerful than the regular Sharingan, and in the Itachi Midnight novel, it's stated to be able to output several times more chakra than the 3 Tomo Sharingan when using jutsu. So if anything, Itachi not having his MS activated is an even bigger factor than Naruto being tired. This means that MS Itachi should be roughly as fast as post-B training KCM Naruto, which in my opinion would make him faster than Kushina, but still a bit slower than Minato. Alright, now that we've gotten the scaling for Itachi and Kisame out of the way, it's time to get into how this fight would actually play out. Starting off, it's important to recognize that Minato's FTG will be extremely important in this fight, because it'll be his main way of countering Itachi's Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi. The Flying Thunder God being a counter to Amaterasu is very consistent, since the Raikage dodged it in his fight with Sasuke, and while Itachi's Amaterasu is faster than Sasuke's, Minato's FTG is also way faster than the Raikage, so he should be able to teleport away from the Black Flames pretty easily. As for Tsukuyomi, Minato's FTG being able to counter it may seem a bit weird, but it does make sense. At its simplest, Genjutsu functions by the user inserting their chakra into the target's brain in order to control their 5 senses, which means that if you can dodge the incoming chakra sent by the user, you won't get caught by the Genjutsu. In the manga, the best example of this is probably in the 5 Kage's fight against Madara, where one of Madara's wood clones was forced to hold the Raikage still in order to put him under Genjutsu because of how fast he was. And there's an even more blatant example of this in the Itachi Daylight novel, where Itachi was able to physically dodge Obito's Genjutsu by dropping under it, which shows that you can outspeed Genjutsu to avoid getting caught in it, hence why Minato's FTG will be a very good way for him and Kushina to evade Tsukuyomi. But even though the Flying Thunder God can evade both Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu, Minato and Kushina will still have a tough time against Itachi because of the Susanoo. Itachi Susanoo will be a massive handful because it possesses the Totsuka Blade and Yada Mirror. A big advantage Minato and Kushina have had so far in these matchups is that none of the Akatsuki members have been strong enough to destroy Kushina's chains, but since the Totsuka Blade is a spirit weapon that's stated to be able to cut anything, it should be able to cut through the chains like butter. The best case you can make for Minato and Kushina destroying Itachi Susanoo is by using the feat of Minato's Rasengan clashing with a Nine Tails Biju Bomb in the one-shot, which is very impressive because even though Kurama was being suppressed by Kushina's chains, we know that he at least had more than 6 tails worth of V2 chakra, since the Biju Bombs from 4 and 6 Tails Naruto are only about the size of a hand, whereas the one Minato clashed with was bigger than his whole body. Even though this feat is extremely impressive, the idea that Minato can just crack open Itachi Susanoo with his regular Rasengan is questionable at best, and I personally don't think he'd be able to do it. The only other argument I've heard for Minato getting around Itachi Susanoo is by using FTG to teleport it away, as it is shown that Uchiha can be separated from the Susanoo itself. However, I doubt this would work either, because in the War Arc, when Tobirama teleports the Kurama avatars, Minato and Naruto get transported as well, so if Minato tries to teleport the Susanoo away from Itachi, Itachi would likely just get transported with it, and Minato will have just wasted his chakra for nothing. And remember, Kisame is going to be backing up Itachi with large-scale water-style ninjutsu the entire time, which alongside the Susanoo is going to put a ridiculous amount of pressure on Minato and Kushina. But on the flip side, it's not like Minato and Kushina will be easy to take out either, because Minato is way too goddamn fast to hit, and as I said earlier, he has a mark on Kushina that he can teleport to as well. Because of this, Minato and Kushina may just be able to teleport around the battlefield and stall until Itachi's out of chakra, as using the Mangekyo is extremely taxing, and Itachi has to deal with his illness on top of that. This is a particularly good method of taking Itachi down, since Itachi will be forced to keep his Susanoo up for the majority of the fight, as deactivating it would leave him wide open to getting stabbed by Minato blitzing him with FTG just like he did to Obito. Realistically, this matchup would mostly come down to if Minato and Kushina could take out Kisame relatively early and then outlast Itachi by avoiding his Mangekyo abilities with the Flying Thunder God. Honestly, I will say that this is probably the toughest matchup to decide on so far, but I still do lean towards Minato and Kushina winning. Like I said earlier, Minato and Kushina both have higher stats than Kisame, and considering Minato's Rasengan feat against the Nine Tails, I wouldn't be surprised if a Rasengan or two would be enough to take Kisame out, especially if his chakra is being suppressed by Kushina's chains. Of course, you could argue that Kisame could just absorb the Rasengan with Samehada, but this requires us agreeing on something that simply isn't true, which is the idea that Kisame would be fast enough to block any of Minato's attacks. And Kisame will also be unwilling to use his Water Shark Dome in this fight, because Minato could just teleport out of it, but someone who can't as easily escape the Water Dome is Itachi, which means that Kisame's Water Dome will probably inconvenience Itachi more than the people he's fighting against. So, I do think that the chances of Kisame getting taken out early is pretty high, but the significantly harder part for Minato and Kushina comes after that, because they still have to deal with Itachi. I do lean towards Minato and Kushina outlasting Itachi, because Minato's FTG is just way too fast, being capable of intercepting 8th Gate Guy and teleporting away before he got hit. I've seen a lot of people make the counter argument that Minato only intercepted Guy's air kicks, which are significantly slower than his normal speed. However, if you actually read the fight, you would know that the attack Minato intercepted wasn't Guy's basic air kicks, it was the much quicker Sekizo barrage, which Ten Tails Madara himself considered to be fast. So, Minato's teleportation speed should just be way too fast for Itachi to hit, which is why both him and Kushina should be able to avoid Itachi for the relatively short amount of time it takes him to run out of stamina. I know this is a pretty anticlimactic way for the fight to end, and to be fair, it's not like it's going to be easy for Minato and Kushina to pull this off, as Itachi won't just be sitting there like an idiot wasting all of his chakra. After all, he is a genius that will almost assuredly try to come up with some sort of counter to FTG, but I just don't see a way he can land a clean hit on someone as fast as Minato with instant teleportation. Of course, if you do think that Itachi can find a way to outsmart Minato and predict where he's going to teleport ahead of time to land a hit with the Totsuka blade, then the odds would definitely be in his favor, because Itachi can definitely take out Kushina once she's by herself, but Minato is a strategic genius in his own right, as shown by him being able to successfully come up with a counter to Obito's Kombui after seeing the jutsu a single time, which no other character in the series was able to do. I mean, Konan literally needed a decade of prep time and 600 billion paper bombs to counter Kamui, and the only other time we see Obito's phasing get hard countered is when Kakashi, another Kamui user, was fighting against him. So, The idea that Itachi is so much smarter than Minato that he can predict where Minato will teleport when there are dozens of marked kunai scattered across the battlefield is pretty unlikely to say the least. Couple this with the fact that Kushina will be there to watch Minato's back and warn him if Itachi ever tries to catch him off guard, and it becomes close to impossible for Itachi to land a hit. This means that eventually Itachi will run too low on chakra to keep his Susanoo up, and when that time comes, Kushina will be able to use her adamantine chains to suppress the little chakra Itachi has left, and then Minato will be able to swoop in with a Rasengan, winning them the fight. Summing things up, I do think that Minato and Kushina beat all 4 Akatsuki duos because they are honestly one of the strongest two-man cells in the entire series, being capable of taking down characters like the Ninetales who are just above the Akatsuki's pay grade. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to subscribe and click the video on the end screen. Later!